Are you ready to discover the secrets to achieving the perfect balance between automation and human interaction in your small business? What happens when the lines blur and the system starts making decisions on its own? Find out how to navigate this precarious situation in today's episode.
Welcome to Biz Help For You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Rich Edwards is the CEO of Mindspan Systems, which helps community financial institutions transform themselves with data-driven strategies and technologies. Rich has worked extensively with banking, insurance, and financial services clients worldwide during his career. He has led product strategy in data center automation and artificial intelligence, including the launch of IBM Watson Developer Cloud. Rich has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Rensselaer. I'm not sure I said that correctly.
Rensselaer, yeah. Nobody knows how to say it, but that's fine. RPI is the short form. But
there you go. RPI, Polytechnic Institute, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and served as an engineering officer in the U.S. Army. So, Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. Before I get into questions on the topic I have for you, I would love for you just to tell us a little bit of your story and how you became involved in finance.
Okay. Yeah. So I had a very kind of unusual or atypical career path. I was an engineer in undergraduate school, went to college for that, and went on a ROTC scholarship. So, the Army paid for it, and this was in the 90s, and it was a completely different experience than it is today. And so I was in the Army through the mid to late 90s, and then got out in 99 and worked in manufacturing for a little bit, and then ended up going back to school and got my MBA at Carolina, and ended up at IBM. And that's really kind of where I got into the business of software within the industry and domain of finance. And, a couple of different hops in there, but ended up working in kind of like main data center automation, data tools for banking and governments along that line, and really kind of got to understand that business, and was there from, 2009 to 2012, which was, when you saw massive consolidation and, this kind of, the Great Recession that started in banking. So that was quite a front row seat to have there. And in 2013, I think it was midway through 13, I got tapped by somebody I'd worked with to say, hey, we're starting a new business unit in artificial intelligence called IBM Watson. And this had kind of come out of the work that went into what was called the Grand Challenger, like the Jeopardy game show competition, and looking to commercialize that. And they wanted to do things that were around services that our customers could build on top of, instead of things that IBM would build itself and sell to them. And we were calling it Developer Cloud, but it was a very different outreach than what IBM typically does. And I was not the guy who, had the background in artificial intelligence, but I did know how to get things done within IBM. And so that was kind of like how I got pulled into that. And then for the next 4 years, kind of drank from the fire hose at, what was a really exciting time to be part of that industry. So I really, if people ask me, like, how did you get there? I was like, blind luck, like just I was the unlikely right person at the right time. But I did get to learn an awful lot about the technology, about the industry, and in particular, how it was being used and not used, and what was interesting and made a really good use case and what didn't. And because I had this background in finance and banking, I kind of became the de facto like bank guy in Watson, like go talk to a lot of the banks, particularly when they're interested on building on this. And I did that for 4 years. And in 2018, I looked at where it was going and what my career path was. And since I had gone to really business school, 15 years before that, had really wanted to be on my own, to try it on my own. And, getting into my mid 40s, it's like, look, you're only going to get a couple more bites at this apple. Like, you're either going to do it now or you're never going to do it. And so decided to make the move. And then that eventually led me to Mindspan Systems. And that's, how did I get here? Right. That's the short version. So,
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that. And
sure.
I know a lot of times people are thinking that AI is relatively new, but as you were saying, I mean, it's been a while since it's out there, but probably people are thinking right now more about like Chat GPT and those kind of things.
Yeah.
But we do know technology has been around, and having different pieces of software that we can connect with and work with, even as individuals or entrepreneurs, not even just in the banking that I know you're helping those types of clients too, but there's a lot of things out there, like even the chat bots and all of this that is being used. And I know sometimes as entrepreneurs, like, we're trying to engage our customers, we're trying to make things more efficient, we're trying to use this technology as best as possible to make it, easy for us and easy for them too. But I know sometimes we frustrate our customers too, or I know I get frustrated. I hate chatbots because it doesn't answer the question that I'm trying to ask a lot of times.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to touch on that, maybe, is how can those of us who are trying to use technology effectively make it where it's helping our customer, we're understanding what their needs are and not having them feel like they're being ignored or misunderstood?
Yeah, no. I mean, great question. There's one question you asked in there at the beginning, which I think is worth addressing quickly. And it's just, why now? Like, what is different about what we're experiencing right now than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 40 years ago, right? So a lot of the understanding and the mathematics and the science behind a lot of what we're seeing today, particularly in natural language processing, has existed for 40, 50 years. The understanding about what was possible for a machine or a computer to do has existed for a long time. What wasn't there was the raw computing power and then the economically available computing power to really pull it off. So if we want to look back 10 years ago, which was about the time when, I was in Watson, it was really that was really when the gas was starting to get put onto cloud computing. And just right down the cost curve of like what you could get available to you, whether you were a startup or a large enterprise and everybody in between. So it was like the availability of the compute power. There was also a combination with the availability of specific types of compute power, particularly you hear the term GPU used a lot, which is graphical processing unit. And that just allowed for a lot of the training of models. Why it has become suddenly more efficient is they're enabled to run in parallel instead of in series. So instead of sequence like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, you run all the steps at once. And it's not just 10 steps, it's 1,000,000 steps, it's 10 million steps, it's 1,000,000,000,000 steps. And being able to do that at very, very large scales, it's not 10 times as efficient or 100 times efficient. It's really like 1,000,000 times as efficient and quickly. And all of the metrics that you want to look at as far as the availability of that and the efficiency of it, strictly from a physics and mathematics standpoint, right? So we've kind of hit this tipping point. Cloud computing plus GPU silicon technology plus some of the recent innovations in software. And one of the things you point out is Chat GPT. The T stands for transformer. And that is really an innovation that only came out in 2017. The idea of like what a transformer is and how it allows at the software level, at the model level, to take advantage of this like parallel computing. So that's, I don't want to go too deep in it. And if anybody really wants to look for more resources, definitely reach out to me and we can kind of talk a little bit more. But that's kind of like, why now? There's a combination of a couple of things that have really just made it possible, made it available. So.
Right. Well, I think the ease of accessibility too, right? When I remember learning in school that, computers used to fill a room. And that was like one computer, right? And how slow it was compared to now, where even on our phones, we all have little computers basically with us that we can do a lot of these things with technology, and it, keeps improving over time, right? And so having to just learn an effective way to use it, whether again, it's us as an individual or as business, but trying to figure out all the technology that's even out there and how to use it and keeping up with it, right? We also know, like generationally, there's people who are much younger who get all of this technology and how to use everything more, easily, I think, than sometimes those of us who are getting to be a little bit older and having to learn all the steps and how to use everything too. So I don't know if you have any guidance to anyone who's listening, who's like frustrated because, well, I don't quite understand it all and I don't know how to implement it.
Yeah. So I'll say one thing, like it has never been easier to just try it, to just go out there and use it. The most accessible one is, and this is the most popular one, is ChatGPT. You can try it for free. Go out there and try it. I think all you need is a Google ID. You might be able to register directly, but it's like it's nothing. Go out and try it and just use it, and just like experiment. Right? Just what are the limits of it? What can I do? What can I not do? What can it do for me? There's a couple of really good resources as far as adding information and what's called a prompt creation, because that's really what you're doing, is you're just going into a chat window and asking questions or giving instructions for what you want. And you can kind of think of it as you're programming in English language, right? You're just asking it what you want to do. There's a great organization by a man named Andrew Ng, who is one of the kind of godfathers of artificial intelligence. And he has a course out there called, I believe it's called Generative AI, Getting Started or for Beginners. I'll send you a link. We can put it in the show notes. It's a great primer, like explains everything in a very understandable way, shows you what the limits are, how to use it, how to like be kind of efficient for the, use cases that you find most useful. And it's a just get your feet wet, right?
Right.
So let me talk to one thing, because you were talking about it particularly from the standpoint of, am I too old for this, right? Which begins to expose a fear around this, right? Which is the number one thing that comes up. And in fact, one of my most trafficked like pieces of content and blog posts is, will AI take my job, right? Like, by far, by a wide margin. And I'll say there's a good news, bad news, good news to that, right? Once you go down the path of trying it, like, let me just try it out, let me do a couple of things, you kind of quickly understand what the limits are, right? You get this kind of like magical sense of like, I asked it to write a paragraph and it wrote this thing and it's amazing and it reads great. And then you start to pick at it and refine it a little bit, and you understand like, oh, okay, like it does a thing, but it's clearly not as smart as me. It doesn't know everything I know. It's terrible at context and like putting things together. But if I can make the questions and the prompts and what I'm expecting it to do narrow enough and give it specific enough instructions, which is essentially this idea of prompt engineering, you can get some decent output out of it. But it is not going to replace you in your job, at least as it is right now, for a lot of things, right? So that's the good news. The bad news is the risk to your job isn't AI, it's somebody using AI, which means the other thing you figure out is like how quickly you can do things, how much more productive it makes you as the user, not it by itself, but you with the right prompts, asking it the right way, working it into your workflow for how you do things. And we can talk through some small business ones. I mean, obviously content creation, it's a huge boost to you, right? It's not a fire and forget. You still got to work with it. You still got to edit it. You still got to like work through it and make it like specific to what you want and, the type of audience that you're writing for. But man, does it take you from a blank page to, something that's probably better than a rough draft like that. And it's a huge help. Think about all the things that you do from a communications or a marketing collateral standpoint, and how oftentimes those are for your entire market, or maybe you narrow it down to a persona. There's a belief that in relatively short order, anything that is written in any context, email, letters, text, whatever, will only be written for the person receiving it. Meaning the ability, like this kind of like superpower from a writing and written communication generation standpoint will allow you to personalize it to everyone, to an individual, not just to a segment, not just to a specific buying occasion, but to the person you're writing to, without you having to sit down and start from scratch on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Given enough outside information, it speeds up that ability for you to provide personalized and more relevant communication, blog posts, marketing collateral, etc. Right? And the way I've kind of talked about this from a use case standpoint is, okay, think about what you're doing, right? And the best way to kind of think about particularly things like ChatGPT is like, imagine the summer intern, right? Here's somebody who's very eager, they're competent, they're literate, but they don't know anything about your business. They don't know anything about your customers. They don't know anything about your market. However, if you give them specific enough instructions, they'll go off and do exactly what you ask them to do. Hey, here's a new report from the government in my industry, a regulator, a market report about my, industry market share, my competitors' collateral, anything that you have around that, and say, read through all of this, 10 pages, 100 pages, 1,000 pages, read all of it and give me a summary of it. Go off and do that, right? And you kind of think like, yeah, an intern could do that, right? A perfectly competent intern can do that. You can do that all summer long. Keep giving them stuff on and on and on and on, right? And they'll come back and give you more information. Even probably at the end of it, be able to, connect the dots between them and give you some really useful feedback, or be able to kind of revise things that will address this new information that came in. All right. Well, now imagine you had 10 interns or 100 or 1,000, and it was really easy to give them these specific instructions, and also for them all to work together in a coordinated way, right? You're not herding cats. You're just saying, I need you to go do this thing, divvy up all the work between everybody and come back and do it, right? Well, what would you do different? How would you approach your work if you had this kind of army at your beck and call? Well, for some of this stuff, you do have that today. You're able to kind of do things at scale that were impractical or even impossible before. And I think one of the ones, particularly from a small business standpoint, way many small businesses stand out, particularly service businesses, is the level of attention and care and personalized service they bring to their customers, right? That's what you stand out for. That's how you stand out today. If you take this capability and begin to work that into how you do your job, right? And not just from a standpoint of I'm trying to save money. Maybe I'm trying to go faster. Maybe I can respond faster, but maybe I can be more personalized and more relevant to my customers. It's not just about saving time or money. It's about providing a level of service that didn't exist before, that nobody else does. And that's where that idea of I'm doing something brand new, I'm doing something that didn't exist before. I'm maybe going after clients that I couldn't because it took me too long to go after them, or I couldn't do it at a service level that was going to work. And this is where you get into that good news element, right? That if all you do is look at it as a cost savings element, then yeah, you're probably going to get into like a price or speeds and feeds type competition with somebody. But if you look at it as this allows me to do stuff that I couldn't or wouldn't do or nobody is doing today, that's where it opens up a whole new element of opportunity, particularly for small businesses that are willing to do that and explore it at this stage.
Well, like you said, it could bring some cost savings and it could help us be able to do other things, but again, it has to make sure that it's giving the information to the customer that they're looking for, things like that too, so they're not getting frustrated with the way you are interacting with them, right? Because that's where I get frustrated sometimes with those chatbots, because it doesn't always answer questions that I have, and then I'm trying to find the answers and they only have certain things programmed. And then trying to reach someone by the phone, like those are things that I get frustrated with technology. So
yeah,
what do you say to the person who is saying, well, I still want to implement this, but how do I make sure that it does the things that I want it to do so that the customer gets the response that they're looking for?
Yeah, I think there certainly are use cases for that as you've described, and I think where you see that being successful is in, if you think of it from like a call center terminology, they'll use the word deferment, right?
Mhm.
And that basically means, do we have like a Pareto, like 80-20 effect on why we're having customer support or customer response? I remember working with an insurance company once, and they kind of talked about how they were mainly concerned about call volumes that would happen at specific points of the month where it would exceed their capacity. And
Mm.
all they needed to do was take maybe 15 or 20% of their support volume out for maybe 48 hours out of the month,
Mhm.
right? And it turned out that like 60% of their volume was password reset, right? People
Mhm.
just trying to get in there. So if they could create a self-service automated approach to password reset, it would save them from having to essentially like put capital into expanding their call center operation, or bring in a much higher priced outsourcer just to cover that time period and all of the headache and nonsense and quality issues that runs into that. And so they were like very successful with that, right? And it only needed to do one thing. All they
Mhm.
needed to do was just take that like top layer off of what was going in there, and they could handle everything else. So that's one way to look at it, is like, what's the weak link in this whole thing?
Mhm.
The other part is, there's a lot of value in this that is working on the inside and helping you be more effective and productive, and still allowing you to have like a person as part of your customer interface, right?
Mhm.
There's things you can do effectively using your own information, your own data, without necessarily giving it all up to a service provider like OpenAI or through Microsoft or Anthropic or somebody like that. That even if they say they're not trading on your data, you begin to kind of like lose control of it a little bit. And I'll just say, as a side note, your instincts on that, if that was your instincts, you are 100% right. That first party data that you have about your customers, your market, how you operate as a process, everything that you've learned that is kind of how you operate and how you make money as a business, is valuable. And
Mhm.
I think that's not widely understood or accepted. And as a result, like all of that data that you have, again, first party data that you have, that only you have, I believe is undervalued right now.
Mhm.
And in the future, as the more of this becomes more accessible and you're able to do more with it, that first party data has become more and more valuable. Things that you're able to do, questions you're able to answer, approaches you're able to take, that you can't go ask ChatGPT for that information because only you know that information. So
Mhm.
just as an aside, first party data, be long on that, valuable and protected. I
Yep.
was just going to say, there are approaches where you can leverage some of the magic that you see in large language models like ChatGPT, but using your own information and context. And if you're interested in that, reach out to me. So there are ways where you can use your own information and still take advantage of kind of this magic coming out of large language models like ChatGPT. One example is retrieval augmented generation. Look that up. There's some great examples for, essentially how to use your data to create better and more personalized prompts without feeding all of your information into an LLM to potentially have it trained on. And if you have questions on it, reach out to me and we can talk, and I can point you to something more from a practitioner standpoint.
Mhm. Well, what I was thinking while you were talking too about that call center case where,
Mhm.
a huge portion of this was something that could very simply be handled and get the answer to the person who needs it. On the other side of the frustration that I sometimes feel when the chatbots can't give you the information you need is when you do have to wait on hold forever, like to talk to someone where you just could get a simple answer. So I think it's figuring out where exactly you can use this to give
Mhm.
the information effectively, but still have the customer service to support them if there is something that can't easily be answered. So it's just that balance, right?
Sure.
Because as consumers, we do want to be able to get the information as quickly as possible too. So I do appreciate that there are companies doing their best to implement that. It's just sometimes it takes a little work, right, to get it
Yeah,
handled.
I'll say this, like that is going to become more route, right? Like you kind of think back to even the early 90s, right? There were computers, there were companies that were like computerized companies, right? Like that was a differentiator. And then obviously there were internet companies. We kind of saw that whole thing. And then there were mobile companies. Well, nobody describes themselves as a computerized company or an internet company or a mobile company. That's all given. Like that is a given. That is just business as it is. And we're kind of in that stage right now where for a time period, being powered by AI, being able to do things in the forefront, maybe even in the customer experience standpoint, will be a differentiator. In short order, and probably a lot faster than what we've seen in the past, it will just be a given. It will be baked into everything that you do. And this capability will be part of what you get from like your CRM or something like that. Right. So that's the element of I can sit and wait and it'll show up. But then you're kind of in that me too phase. Well, also me, I also do this because everybody else does this. And if I don't, I look dull. Right. But it doesn't give you any advantage. It doesn't give you that ability to kind of stand out in front of what you're doing. And that's what playing with it right now, trying to work it into your own existing workflow. That's where you can be able to see where some of these opportunities are and where you can jump ahead.
Well, and it does seem so overwhelming sometimes, but like you said, try to just get in there and try things out and see what happens. And some of it does come with software we may just use in our business. It's already part of it, like you said, too. So I think it's just becoming comfortable and understanding how it's going to help us be successful with our own companies and helping our customers and, using it the way that it was meant to be. It just sometimes takes a little while to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a learning curve to it, but man, never has anything been as accessible as this, right? This is an age where you're going to see computer programming will be done in English. That's the point to where we're getting on this, which is to say anyone who speaks English is a computer programmer and can potentially take advantage of it. And really what the limits are how well do you understand the problems of your customers that you're solving? And how creative can you be about it to kind of stand out and differentiate yourself, which that knows no limits from an age standpoint.
Right. That's very true. And like I said, new entrepreneurs who are just starting businesses can start using this right away too. It doesn't have to be someone that's been in business for a while. Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a great opportunity for that as well.
So are there any final takeaways you would love to share, something I didn't know to ask that would be helpful for the listener to understand this topic?
I think it would behoove everyone to at least become familiar with the technology, at least understand it. Spend an afternoon on it if you haven't already. And if you have, sit down and think, what are 10 ways I could potentially leverage this? How could I use this in what I'm doing? And if you're stuck there, ask it, how can I better leverage the capabilities that tool, ChatGPT, Bard, whatever it is that you're using? How can I leverage that in this type of business that I'm doing? And it will give you a plethora of ideas to look at. And it's just a matter of you stepping out and trying one and seeing if it works, doing the experiment. And frankly, the risk of that is very, very low at this point.
Right. And just keeping up with the changes and knowing that we may learn something now and then it will change soon. So just being open to the fact that we're going to have to just keep up with it.
And frankly, you don't have to be on the cutting edge of everything with this. It's new enough and it's moving at a pace that is consumable for most people that you could take advantage of it and realize a lot of those efficiencies today. and begin to work in that and begin to make permanent changes in, not only how you work, but the economics of your business.
Right. Well, I know this has been informative, but we're getting close to the end of the time we have together. So I would love for you to share how our listeners can connect with you if they would like to get more information or just, start to learn from you from your, like you said, you have blogs and other things that you've shared before.
Yeah. So my company is Mindspan Systems. We're at mindspandinc.com. You can follow me and reach out to me where I'm most active on LinkedIn, and I'm Rich Edwards on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for being a guest on my show, talking about this topic. I know sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming for some that see it as hard to grasp, but I think you at least shared a few tips about how to start just practicing with it and get exposure to it so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Candy.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview, and remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, ABandP is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help For You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.